just say welcome everybody. This is, would you believe it, the last round of the leagues completely. We've only got one more competition to go, and that's the of the year competition, which will be next Thursday, folks. Not in 2 weeks' time. It's next Thursday. It only dawned on me this morning that it wasn't 2 weeks, it was 1 week.
On awry with the program.
Yeah, well, the problem is because I haven't got it physically. I have to keep going onto the website, and I keep forgetting to do that. So making assumptions is not a good idea. Anyway, so this is the last round. We have Rusty Lindsay with us to judge tonight. I can't remember. Have you ever actually judged on your own for us before? I don't think you have you?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yep. All right. Good evening, everyone. It's good to be with you to judge your competition. Apologies from Barbie, because Barbie was meant to judge this, but there was a slight mix-up in bookings, and so she had a double booking tonight. She's actually downstairs judging Tenby Camera Club, which is in Wales. So I'm upstairs judging yours.
Okay, so we have 45 images altogether.
Okay.
Is Buzzard on Prey.
Hopefully you can all hear me okay.
Yes.
Okay, first image up is Buzzard on Prey. In fact, we've started off with a very, very strong image here. A natural history shot of the buzzard. Looks like it's possibly eating a rabbit or something like that. We're not quite sure. We can't really see. And it's been snowing. Could be quite problematic to photograph this bird amongst the snow to get the detail, but I think the photographer has done a brilliant job. I'm trying to imagine these as prints because it's supposedly a virtual print competition, and this would certainly suit a print because you'd be able to control the detail in the snow more successfully than if it was a projected image, because there would be a tendency that you could burn out certain areas. But even looking at it on my computer screen, there is lovely detail throughout the image in the snow in the foreground and in the out of focus background. The bird itself, the buzzard, is beautifully sharp from head to tail, so to speak. And it's in the middle of doing something. It's got a beak and it's picked out a bit of flesh, which is added that little bit of color there. And I like the fact that you can see its eye, and it's obviously concentrating very well. Concentrating on what it's doing, engrossed in picking bits of flesh out of its prey. Bit of space for it on the right hand side, which helps to balance the picture up compositionally, because it's space for it to move into, even though it isn't actually moving. But when it comes to the composition, that is very pleasing way to present it. The colors are believable. The lighting is great for the subject. Not too contrasty, but bright enough to pick out all the detail. You can see the texture and the detail in the feathers of the bird and so on. Even, like I said, the detail in the snow in the foreground. I like the fact that you've got a few little tufts of grass sticking up just to add some extra interest to that area in the picture. Now, whether someone just happened to come across this or it's been set up, I don't know, but it doesn't really matter. It's the final photograph that I'm judging. So an excellent one to start with. I am going to hold some back and score them at the end. And this first one is actually going to be held back. That's okay.
Pollination.
Yeah, another natural history subject here, pollination. We've got the bumblebee, or I call it a bumblebee. I don't know whether there's a technical name from a Latin name for it, but the bumblebee sitting on the flower head, no idea what the flower is, but that's not important. All to do with various colors in this one. I like the way that the background has been thrown out of focus, so it's not distracting away from the main subject. You're filling almost 3/4 of the frame with the flower head itself, and you've got some interest there with the flowers, and then you've got the bee itself on the left-hand side there. It's reasonably sharp. You can, especially on the wings, on the back of the butterfly, perhaps not so much on the head of it. I'm not quite sure. It could be because you can't really see the head of the butterfly, head of the bee, because it's tucked down. But the qualities there we're looking for. Does go slightly out of focus on the right-hand side. I would possibly try and tone it down on the top right-hand corner, just darken down some of those lighter tones to help hold it into the picture. But I think everything else works reasonably well, and certainly the quality is there. And like I said, perhaps the bee itself isn't quite as distinct as I'd like it. If it was head on, or you could see the antennae and the head clearly, that might have been far more successful. But having said that, it's still a good quality image, and it must be very difficult to get a very small creature like this sharp throughout, as well as rendering the flower head sharp as well. So that one scores 7 points.
Cow Tower, Norwich.
Cow Tower. I've never heard of that. Yes, an interesting subject. You can see why the photographer was attracted to it. You've got the unusual round tower itself, and you've got some trees on the left-hand side. And then you've got a body of water in the foreground there, which is very useful because you can get a reflection. You've got the reflection of the tower itself, and you've also got the reflection of the trees, and you've got leaves and various other debris floating in the water. It's adding kind of texture to the water surface itself. At the same time, it's been slightly rippled, which has helped to distort that reflection, which is great. And I feel it balances up well in the picture. Perhaps a little bit unfortunate that the sky in the background there is sort of quite bright and white. Ideally, we would like a bit of color towards blue. If you look at the reflection, funnily enough, you can actually see some blueness in the sky, which is a little bit unusual. So perhaps it's to do with exposure at the time. The reflection is more underexposed, so it's bringing that blue out. So that's really what lets this down a little bit for me, is the fact that you haven't got any color in the sky, and it's the brightest part of the picture, and it tends to draw you up to the top of the image. And there's another thing. I looked at these because I've had them in advance, and I looked at them on a large screen, calibrated screen, and the detail in the actual tower is a little bit degraded, and I'm not quite sure why, whether some kind of after treatment's been applied, or it was underexposed and you've tried to bring the detail. I'm not quite sure, but the quality in the actual tower and trees is a little bit degraded, which is a shame. And it's a bit pixelated and so on throughout the image. But like I said, compositionally, it works very well. I like the inclusion of the reflection. It's just the bald white sky and the quality of the image. So Cow Tower, Norwich, scores 6 points.
Keeping Cool.
Yep, we've got the gentleman here sitting in the swimming pool. And when I first looked at this, I thought he was splashing the water. But as I look at it closer, I realized I think the water is running down behind him or in front of him. I'm not quite sure, sort of like a waterfall, because you can see movement at the top of the frame. So I presume that's what's happening. The water's flowing down over the gentleman, and he's sitting there trying to keep cool. And that's quite effective. I like the positioning in the frame where he's sitting. Also, the lighting suits the subject. Quite sort of harsh lighting, but it's not too harsh that it's burnt areas out, but it's also brought out detail in the gentleman himself and in the background. Ideally, I would like it if he was looking towards us, so we got a connection with him. I know he's sort of got his head down because there's water pouring over his head, but if you had that eye-to-eye contact, that would help to draw you into the picture, and I feel that would be far more successful. But the colors work well together. The blueness in the water, you've got a blue, sort of a turquoise, I presume it's turquoise, across the center, and then you've got various other tones of blue in the mosaic tiles above. So all the colors work very well and contrast with the coloration of that sort of pinky, almost reddy color of the gentleman's skin tones. And also you've got kind of like circles of water. So whether water is splashed up on the camera lens, I'm not sure, or whether we're looking through a glass window and water is splashed up onto, I'm not quite sure. but that doesn't really distract from the final image. I think really it's just the fact that he's not looking towards the camera, but the quality's there. Certainly the quality's there. We're looking at in a picture. So keeping cool scores 7.
Inside centre.
Inside center. Yeah, there's quite a lot of I noticed there's quite a lot of flower pictures, sort of still life type flower images, and they're all very good. And we're starting off with this one, just concentrating on the one flower head itself, the central area, the stamens, I think that's a technical term, are sharp. So are the petals on the left hand side. They do start to gradually drift out of focus on the right hand side, and obviously the one in the middle there is totally out of focus. But obviously what the photographer was trying to concentrate on is that central area. I like the slant to the flower, so a slight diagonal helps when it comes to the composition, and setting the subject against a black background really makes it stand out and gets rid of any kind of distraction in the background that could take her attention away. I also like the fact that you've got the pollen from the stamens, which has obviously been blown or whatever, and it's sprinkled over the petals on the left-hand side there. The colors work well together with the purpley colors of the petals against the yellows and the green of the stems. Like I said, there's quite a few flower type pictures, so they are tending to kind of compete against each other, but this one is reasonably good. Ideally, I would have preferred it if the petal on the right hand side was as sharp as the petals on the left hand side, so it balanced up. The lighting that's illuminated this subject works well, quite bright lighting, but not too harsh, so you've got burnt out highlights and blocked out shadows. So inside center scores 7.
Crested tit cairngorms.
Yeah, natural history subject of the bird, sharp where it needs to be, and that's the bird itself, on its head and its beak and so on. Obviously, as you go down the body, it slightly goes out of focus. I like the fact that you've thrown the background and it's muted, it's totally out of focus, so it makes the main subject of the bird stand out very well. And it's sitting on this little branch, which is coming off this larger branch. You have got a large area of the tree itself, or the large branch at the top, which takes up quite a bit of space. And I actually experimented with this one when I was looking at it. I slightly cropped in. I kept this square crop, but I cropped in tighter on the bird. So you still had some of that area of branch at the top there, and then you lost a bit on the left hand side and the right hand side and from the bottom. And I felt that was far more pleasing. It concentrate your attention more on the bird, but that's just a minor point. The lighting works well on the subject itself. It's bringing out all the detail in the plumage. It's also bringing out the detail in the bark of the branch and so on. And the colors are very believable. So a strong natural history picture of the crested tit. And this one scores 8 points.
African storm brewing.
African storm brewing, yes. I wouldn't have guessed it was Africa, I must admit, when this came up. It wasn't the first thing that sort of came to mind, but a quite simplistic landscape, compositionally wise. You've got this area of foreground, which has got the long grasses, and then you've got a mid area of some hills and a slight rise to the left-hand side, and a sky at the top there with some cloud formation and so on, just to add some extra interest to the picture. And then you've got the main focal point, which is slightly off center to the left of the tree, which is set against the sky. So it's connecting all those elements together in the final image. So So like I said, compositionally, it's very strong. Personally, for me, I'm not quite sure what's happened. I know it's supposed to, it was storm brewing, but you've got a very unusual coloration to this picture. It seems to be overall a sort of a pinky red color. You've got that in the sky, amongst the clouds, and so you've also got it in the foreground grasses. In fact, it's everywhere, even in the mountain in the background. So whether that was a natural phenomena, I'm not quite sure, but it doesn't quite work for me. It makes the image look a little bit degraded, or as if in the old-fashioned days when you used to have films that would be left in the camera too long and they used to deteriorate. And that's a similar sort of effect we've got on this image. So whether it was done purposely, as an after treatment, I'm not quite sure. But for me, it doesn't quite suit the image, which is a shame because, like I said, everything else has been put together very well indeed. So unfortunately, I forgot to just check my scores, lost it. Unfortunately, this one only scores 5.
The Mill Hotel and Mill Pond.
Yeah, the Mill Hotel and Mill Pond, taken in this panoramic or viewpoint with a long, narrow letterbox shape, which I think certainly suits the subject because you're showing off the church and the buildings in the background there and the trees themselves. Again, you've got a body of water in the foreground, which is very useful because you've got these lovely reflections in the water itself. I also like the clumps of grass at the bottom of the image there, which helps to add a bit of a base to the picture. Detail in the sky, some blue coloration in the sky there, which is helping to hold you in the picture. And you've also got that blue reflected in the water, slightly darker, which again has been slightly distorted by the movement in the water there, which adds an extra element. The lighting is quite strong lighting, which suits the architecture because it gives shape and form and depth to the buildings in the background there, but not too strong that you've really got any burnt out areas in the picture. It would have been ideal if we had I know this is just, I mean, there's nothing the photographer can do about this at the taking stage, but if we had a few more grasses in the foreground there, just to add a stronger base to the picture. Because the trouble when you've got water in the foreground of a picture, it tends to fall out of the bottom of the picture if you haven't got something to hold it in. But that's just a minor point on this occasion. It's a picture postcard type shot, I suppose, of this scene. Or a chocolate box picture, I suppose some people would call it. So the Mill Hotel scores 7.
Bottled Sunshine.
Bottled Sunshine, yeah, another flower type picture, I suppose. Like I said, quite a few of them in this competition. The first thing that strikes you about this is the quality of the image. It's beautiful quality, everything's sharp where it needs to be, and also the quality of light. Now, I'm assuming it's a still life setup, but it could just have been a vase of flowers which was sitting in someone saw the light falling on it and they took a picture of. But I should imagine it's possibly a still life setup. And the lighting works very well indeed. Quite strong lighting, which is picking out the flowers and showing their shape and form. And you've got a little bit of depth to the image. And it's also brought out the shape of the bottle itself. We can make out the detail and so on against a darkish background, a sort of a bluey background, which is slightly lighter blue at the base and then gradually gets darker as you go up to the top of the image. And that dark background helps to make the subject stand out very well indeed from its surroundings. Colors work well together, the yellows and the greens of the flowers. There's a few minor things that I feel don't quite work so well for me. And that is, I'm not quite sure what it is, but through the glass vase itself or bottle itself, you've got some sort of colors and things coming through. And I'm not, whether they're reflections or something like in the glass, I'm not quite sure. And I find that a little bit distracting. If you could imagine, you just saw that blue texture coming through that the background's made out of, that would help to simplify the overall image. I don't mind the leaf that's hanging down, the green leaf which has been distorted and it's hanging down on at the center area of the vase, because that has a connection with the flowers themselves. It's the other colors, there's some blues and reds and some lighter tones, quite muddled and mixed up in there, and I'm assuming it is a reflection of what is surrounding the subject, so that lets it down a little bit, but it's certainly a beautiful quality image, and like I said, the lighting is great. So Bottled Sunshine scores 8 points.
Whittingham Castle Gardens.
Yep, another image where we've used this sort of panoramic view or letterbox presentation to set the scene, which, like I said, works very well when it comes to landscape type pictures. We're looking across an area of grass in the foreground there, and then I'm not sure whether it's a pond or in the midground there, you can't really tell. This area in the center, then you've got trees on the left hand side, trees across the background, and you've got some branches coming in to the picture from the right hand side there, sort of slightly masking the background image. And then unfortunately you've got that bald white sky, which is a shame. It's the brightest part of the picture, and like I said, that tends to catch your eye and draw your attention, and it's drawing your attention up to the top of the frame. It's not really where you want to go. Nowadays, obviously, with Photoshop and Luminar and programs like that, there literally is a button now for putting skies in the picture, which is funny really, because I can remember when I first took up digital 25 years ago, 1996, something. I used to do demonstrations for clubs, and I used to show them how to add skies to pictures. And it used to take about half an hour, 3/4 an hour to do the demonstration. If I did it now, it would be over in a couple of minutes, because all I would say is you press this button and it does it for you. And it literally as simple as that. So I think if this is my picture and you've got the latest Photoshop or something, I would try and photograph a sky and then add it to that area of white, just to tone it down so it isn't so bright. Also the foreground, which is a large area of grass, there isn't much there of interest. And if you're including this large area of grass, really it's good, if you're doing that, it's usually you have something in the foreground to act as a focal point to draw you into the picture, and there isn't anything there, which is a shame really. So compositionally, I feel this one's also a little bit weak. So that was Castle Gardens, Hedingham, and that one scores 5.
Capsicums.
Yes, I had a job pronouncing this one, but I was looking at capsicums. Yep. Another still life subject, using the, I don't know if they're peppers or fruits. I'm not quite sure. I presume they're a type of pepper, I suppose. Very simple setup. You've got the 2 subjects. Normally 2s wouldn't work. Odd numbers usually work better, but this one it does, because you've got the different heights of the peppers themselves. You've got the one on the left hand side, which is at a slight angle, but it's standing upright with the stalk, so it's much higher than the one lying on its side, so it almost creates an L-shaped composition. It's set against a very dark background, which is great because it helps to simplify the image. It contrasts very well with the red in the peppers themselves. Very sort of strong lighting, because half of them are lit and the other half goes into shadow, and that shadow tends to blend quite quickly into the background itself. As a print, you may see a little bit more detail in their shadows. I'm not quite sure. You might be able to control it better as a print, but certainly as a transmitted image or a projected image, as I'm seeing it now, it is rather blocked out. And you have got some rather bright highlights here and there, burnt out highlights on the red fruit, on the red peppers itself, and on the stalk and around the top of it, and on a few places on the one on the right hand side, which I feel I would possibly either have cloned down or toned down or cloned out to tidy it up a little bit. I know the photographer was trying to give shape and form and depth to the image, but the bright highlights do create a little bit of a distraction in the final image. So it's a good idea, well thought out, but I don't think it's quite as successful as it could have been. Like I said, I find it a rather dark, the shadows going into the background, I find sort of darkens the whole image down too much for my liking. So that one scores 6.
A medley of frozen flowers.
Yeah, this one's quite intriguing. If you read the title, you obviously get the impression that they've been either frozen in the freezer or something like that, or in ice, obviously in ice if they're frozen, but it's been done on purpose for the effect. I like the subtleties in the picture, especially the little flower heads on the bottom part of the image, which are slightly diffused. They blend into the lighter background. You've got a hint of blue as well there, which I find quite effective. And then you've got the stalk of the main set of flowers and a slight pink tinge as you go up through the picture, not distorted, pastel-y colors, and that works very well. So compositionally, I think it's a successful image, and I like the subtle tones throughout the image, and it would make a good print. Unfortunately for me, that main sprig at the top there with the yellow flowers, I find a little bit muddled. The flower heads slightly blend together with each other, and it becomes a bit of a mass rather than the separate flower heads. And I think in an ideal world, I'd like a little bit more separation between those flowers. You could have picked a few of them off to try to help simplify the image itself. But I like the feel of the image, and it would certainly create a very successful print when it comes to the tones, because as a print, you could bring out all those subtleties in the final image, which might be lost a little bit as a projected image. So that one, what was it called again? I forgot. Oh, Frozen Flowers scores 7.
Escaped from the greenhouse.
Yeah, another botanical type subject here, haven't we? Looks like a cacti or a succulent of some description here. A simple image, and I like that. Against this deepish blue background, in a way gives a kind of sky feel to the picture, but it may not have been the sky. It could have been something in the background which was that color. I like the inclusion of this stalk or this flower head. I presume it's a flower head coming out, which goes up and then bends over and creates this unusual shape. And you've got some texture in the plant itself. Soft, even lighting, which has brought out some of the detail, but it's not too strong. You haven't really got any burnt out areas or heavy shadows, which I feel suits the subject. Perhaps we could have just increased the contrast a little bit, not so much on the protruding flower head, but on the main part of the plant itself, which is a little bit sort of evenly toned. We could have brought out a bit more contrast in that. It might have lifted it slightly. But having said it, everything else works extremely well. Compositionally, I like the slight diagonal feel to the image. So it's going from the bottom right up to the top left of the picture. Again, possibly I might have been tempted just to crop in a little bit. I think I did experiment with this one to see if it was a little bit more pleasing, but that's just a minor point. And the qualities there we're looking for really in the image. It's sharp where it needs to be. On the main part of the flower. So I'm trying to find what that one scored. 7, that one scored.
Faded daffodils.
Right, faded daffodils. Here we go. Yep, another sort of flower subject, still life, I suppose. You've got 3 this time. Like I said, odd numbers seem to work best, and we've got 3 daffodils here. They look as though they're possibly going past their best. They're beginning to curl up, and you get that slight feeling of the best past their prime. But I think that's what makes it work in this picture, because I like that feel to the image. It's got subtleties of tone throughout the image, and no bright colors there, sort of pastel feel to the colors, and it fills the frame well. It's fanning out in all directions and against this light background. Again, as a print, I should imagine this looks, it would be very successful, because you could control those lighter tones in a print more than you could as a projected image, because they tend to look over bright. But as a print, that should work beautifully. And I like the fact that even though you've got white petals to the daffodils against a white background, you can still make out the detail of them throughout, and the way the light is coming through some of the leaves is very successful. So faded daffodils is going to be held back.
Afternoon in the sun.
Afternoon in the sun. Yes, we've got 2 deer sitting on the grass here, obviously relaxing in the sunshine. In fact, they're so relaxed that it looks as though they've got their eyes closed. Certainly the one on the right has. He's got both his eyes closed. One on the left, I think, has got one eye open. I'm not quite sure. I like the pose they're striking. Even though they've got their eyes closed, they are looking or facing towards us. So that helps to draw you in the picture. Simplistic background, just the grassy background, but it's been thrown out of focus to help make the subject stand out. And just an area of foreground grass to set the scene. This is almost quite a sort of narrow crop, and you can understand why the photographer's done that, because obviously the foreground is just grass and the background is just grass, so we don't really need any more information. So the best thing is to crop that out so it suits the subject. You've got 2 together here, and like I said, normally you want odd numbers, but it does work, and I think it works because the one on the left hand's got darker coat to it, and the one on the right is slightly lighter, so they sort of balance up, but at the same time they're slightly different. So I think you get away with it. Fairly contrasty light falling on the subject themselves. You've got some shadows created from their antler on their backs, but the photographers managed to handle that well, because the one on the right has got some light tones in its coat, which could have burnt out, but if you look closely, there is detail throughout the image. So quite simple, pleasing, not overly exciting, but a successful image. So afternoon in the sunshine scores 7.
Ask flower.
Right, pass flower. Hang on, I've lost my place. Oh, here we go. Yep, another botanical type flower subject again. Similar sort of tones and technique that some of the previous ones we've seen, where you've softened down the image in the background, and that's very successful. And again, I think this one would suit a print as being printed beautifully, because you could control those subtleties of tone which you've got in this image. You've got a lot of strength in the main flower here, with the colorations of the purples, and contrasting well with the yellows of the central area of the stamens and so on. Then you've got the stalk going at an angle into corner, which slightly disappears into the bottom of the image. Background has been diffused. Even the foreground is diffused, so it looks as though the plant is floating there, which I think works very well as an artistic print. Even the strong colorations of the flower itself have been slightly muted to continue that feel of the subtleties in the image, so it's not too stark. Plenty of space when it comes to the composition. You've got the main flower on the right hand side and space to the left, so to speak, for it to move into. And I like the outer focus, soft, looks like blades of grass and so on, or other plants you can see on the left hand side there. They're not too strong, so they act as like a distraction. They just complement the main subject. And the one thing that I think really works in the picture, strangely enough, is on the right hand side, you've got a sort of a skeletal, I'm not sure what it is, but a small plant that she's going on. It curves over and it looks like you've got a flower head on it. I'm not quite sure what's created that, but that balances up well with the main subject, almost like a ghostly replica of the main subject there. So that works in this picture. Let me just double check. So that one scores 8 points.
Quack.
Yep, a very simple scene here. We've got some stepping stones, so to speak, or stones that go out into the water. And you do get the feeling you could step on them and walk out into the water. The water's quite shallow, so you can see through the water and you can see the rocks underneath, which has created this interesting texture and pattern and so on. The lighting's reasonably strong, so it's added depth to the picture. It's brought out the shape and the form of the various rocks and boulders and so on. And then you've got this little duck, which is at the end of the sort of pathway of rocks there to act as a focal point. And he's sitting, or she's sitting there, turning her head in profile so we can see it's a definite shape of a duck. And she's picked out well in the lighting. And compositionally, I think it works just for that point, because you've got the strength of the foreground rock and you're taking in to that area of the picture, and then you've got the duck. Unfortunately, there's one thing that sort of breaks up that simplicity, and it's the fact that the reflection of the duck is actually muddled with another rock that's in the water. And so the head of the reflection, the bit of the head is hidden behind that rock, which is a shame. You imagine if that little boulder wasn't there and you could see the whole of the reflection of the duck and you could see the shape and form, that would be spot on. There's nothing the photographer could do about it. You can't even do anything about it afterwards, because I suppose you could cheat. You could actually create your own reflection of the duck because you've got the head and so on. So you could, if you had the skills, you could reconstruct that reflection. But that's the only thing that slightly spoils it. Otherwise, it's a very strong image. So Quack scores 7 points.
From financial centre to skateboard park.
Yep, cityscape type image. You've got the high-rise buildings, the shiny sort of glass and metal and chrome work, and you've got all the sky being reflected on the building on the left-hand side there, and you've got various other reflections and shapes and so on. Using a wide-angled lens, so you've got the converging verticals, but it's been done on purpose. It's not sort of just a little bit of convergence. It's quite extreme, so it's quite obvious the photographer has done that purposefully. You've got a bit of tone in the sky there in the central area. You've got the light, you've got the sun in the picture, and it's reflecting off the top of that central building, creating this almost starburst effect at the top there. And then you've got this area foreground with the narrow steps leading up. And then you've included a little bit of human interest with the person on the skateboard. Obviously, they're against the light, so to speak, so they've been thrown into semi-silhouette. And if you're doing that, you want an obvious shape, and you can make out it's a person on the skateboard, even though you're not seeing a great deal of detail. There's a lot going on in the picture, but having that person in the foreground does help to simplify the image. Now, I should imagine some people are thinking, well, perhaps you've cropped off the top of the buildings there on the left-hand side, and it would be nice if you had the top in and so on. But perhaps if you did that, the picture would be too narrow and it wouldn't work compositionally. Or you could argue perhaps we could crop down a bit more on those builds, because you've already cropped them off. You could crop some more off to concentrate more on the person in the foreground. I'm sort of split. It does become a little bit muddled overall, but I do appreciate the feeling the photographer's captured in this picture, this sort of urban feel to the image. And it was important that you had that person on the skateboard in the foreground there, just to give you that focal point at the bottom of the picture. So I've lost my place. Oh yeah, financial centre, skateboard park scores 7 points.
Sunset through storm clouds.
Yep. You can see why the photographer photographed this, because you've got this fantastic sky where you've got the cloud formation, and you've got the sunset coming through, the yellows and everything, and you've got these beams of light falling down, and it contrasts well with each other. So it's a very strong sky. So the temptation is, oh, I've got to photograph it, but you want something in the foreground, so you got to have something of interest at the bottom of the picture, because most of the image is sky itself. And then you've got these, I'm not quite sure whether they're cranes or something like that, or it's a dock side, and you've got container ships and so on, where they unload them. I think that's what it is at the bottom. And then there's just a strip of water with some of that light being reflected off the water itself. So you wouldn't normally compose a picture like this, having so much at the little at the bottom and so much at the top, but it works on this occasion because really it's all to do with the sky, and the actual area at the bottom of the cranes and the container ships is just to complement that sky, to set it off. So we can see why the photographer has photographed it like this. Unfortunately for me, is I feel the quality isn't there what we're really looking for. If you look at this closely, it's quite sort of pixelated, and it's slightly degraded, so it's losing a lot of its quality. Now, whether that's because the image was underexposed at the taking stage, because you were photographing against the light, which would have a tendency to underexpose the image, and you've tried to bring the detail out, and that would cause it to slightly degrade. I'm not quite sure. So that lets it down quite dramatically in the final image. So sunset through the storm clouds scores 5 points.
Quartet.
Yep, yeah, another still life type subject with flowers. This time we've got tulips. I like the fact that you've got 4 different sort of styles of tulips, if you see what I mean, different colors. I think that adds a lot of interest to the picture. It's also a good quality image. You know, the lighting suits the subject. Fairly strong lighting, but not too strong so you've got any burnt out highlights or anything like that, but strong enough to bring out the shape and form and add some depth to the image. Again, set against a dark background, which helps to simplify the image and makes the main subjects stand out. I also like the diagonal presentation, diagonal composition, which is going from the bottom left to the top right, which is far more pleasing. And I said that's all to do with the various flowers themselves. You've got the yellow one at the bottom, and then the red, and then the purple, and then you've got a mixture of red and yellow on the right hand side there. Now you could argue that there's probably one too many. You could have argued you could do without the purple one at the top there and left it to 3, but you know, you make your choices on that one, but it's still a good quality image. So quartet scores 8 points.
Meerkat.
Yep. I'm tempted to say simples, but I won't. Now, I thought this was a very striking image of the meerkat. Yes, it's a characteristic shot. It's one we're used to seeing because they stand like that, don't they? As on guard duty, one of them stands and keeps watch while the others go about their business. But I like the fact that this one's been taken in profile. The lighting is good. It's bringing out all the detail in its fur. And I like, even on the back of its head and down its neck, you can see the wispy bits of its fur going down there, and on its eyebrows at the top there, you can make out the details of those eyebrows, and there's a few wispy bits around the chest and everything. So the details there you're looking for in a picture like this. And at the same time, you've thrown the background out of focus, diffused it, has a natural feel to the diffusion. It's not foliage or something like that that's been thrown out of focus. You've got these sort of slightly beigey color tones, I suppose, or greeny beigey tones in the background there, but it still has a natural feel to the image. Plenty of space on the right hand side for the meerkat to look into, so compositionally it balances well in the picture. Even got a little catchlight in the eyes, in the eye, so to speak, which has added that touch of life to the final picture. So it's not meant to be a natural history shot or anything like that. We're not being shown the environment it's in, because I would imagine, educated guess, it's been taken in a zoo or some kind of park, or it's in an enclosure or something like that. But it's a portrait of the creature itself, which I think is very successful. So meerkat, we're going to hold on to that one, please.
Farmhouse in need of TLC.
Right, farmhouse in need of TLC. Yep, you can see why the photographer was attracted to this scene, because you've got this derelict, well, I hope it's derelict, farmhouse with the roof falling in and various other bits all demolished and falling down. And for some reason, us photographers, we tend to be attracted to things that are falling apart. That's why Barbie was attracted to me. And so it creates, and it has a lot of interest in the final image. And like I said, you can see why the photographer photographs this scene, set against a background of some small trees and fields in the background there, and an area of foreground as well, which has got greenery in it. I like the fact you've got an old rusty oil drum and various farm implements that have seen better days at the bottom there. And I think it looks like sort of cloths and towels and things hanging down the side of the building. So perhaps that was a vain attempt to repair parts of the picture. So the actual scene itself has a lot of interest. I think the photographer has applied some kind of after treatment to the image, tonal contrast or detail or something, or structure, high structure has been applied to it. And I can see why the photographer's done that, because when you're dealing with a subject like this, if you add detail or structure to the image, it helps to bring out all the details in the building itself. But unfortunately, it's not only been applied to the building, it's also been applied to the trees and the background and the foreground. So it's made everything, it's covered the whole of the image with this textural detail. So it becomes a little bit muddled. And ideally, what the photographer should have done as an after treatment, they should have only applied it selectively to the building itself and left the surroundings more natural, and that would have had the effect of making the building stand out more from its surroundings. As it is now, like I said, it becomes a little bit muddled. So farmhouse need of TLC scores 6 points.
Proposer.
Proposer, yep. Portrait of a swan. I say a portrait because it's not so much a natural history study of the swan itself. It's just concentrating on the head and neck of the swan. I like the fact that it's got some bits of grass stuck to its beak and a bit hanging off the end there. It's just added a little bit of interest to it. Lovely detail in the actual plumage of the swan itself. Even though it's light coloration and could have a tendency to burn out, you can see detail throughout its head and neck. It's sharp where it needs to be. And you've even got a little catch light in the eye there just to add a bit of life to the picture. Background's been thrown out of focus to make this the main subject stand out and slightly darkened at the top. And again, it has a natural feel to the background. I suppose it's a little bit unfortunate that you've got, I presume it's the rest of its body. It could be another bird, I'm not quite sure. But behind the bottom of the neck, you've got a very bright light area, which I said could be part of the same swan, or it could be another swan, I'm not quite sure. And it's probably the lightest part of the picture. You can't really crop it out at this stage. I wouldn't think it would be a bit too tight, but you could have possibly toned it down a bit more. You could even, seeing this is not a natural history competition, you could even cheated and actually cloned it out so you just had the neck and the head, because it's a shame because everything else is spot on. Like I said, the quality's there and the detail in the actual main part of it. It's just that out of focus lodge of white, which does create a little bit of distraction in this final image. So where's it gone? The poser. The poser scores 7 points.
Okay, we are going to stop there, and if we can start again at 22.
22.
Time to get our comfort break.
Okay, so we're carrying on now. Trio, yes, another still life subject. Lovely quality yet again, what we've seen in some of the previous ones. This one works very well when it comes to the composition because you've got the 3 roses, yellow roses, and they fill the frame very successfully. Very simple vase, again against this dark background at the top, showing a little bit of texture at the bottom there, which sets the subject off very, very well. And the lighting suits, fairly strong lighting, giving shape and form to the flower heads themselves and added some depth to the image. So Trio scores 8 points.
Lost my scores. Why have I lost my scores? Oh. Great score. Yeah.
It probably thinks you're still in Zoom. You may have to tab across back onto.
There we go. 8 points. 8.
Shirley Heights, Antigua.
Shirley Heights. Right, Shirley Heights, Antigua. Yes, another sort of vista shot, panoramic shot here. Like I said, it suits these type of subjects. We're looking across the landscape, and then you've got the ocean in the distance there, slightly the headlands, little islands and so on, and then just a strip of sky at the top of the picture. Some foreground with the rocks and the plant life and so on. So you've got all the elements you're looking for in this type of image. Unfortunately, it's got an overall, to me, it seems to have an overall cyany feel, cyany blue feel to the image. The grass itself feels cyany and blue. You've even, I know it's a sky, but even in the sky you've got the similar tone. So it's got a slight color cast to the image. And I feel because it's such a pleasant looking scene, you want to slightly warm it up a bit just to add to that feeling. But that's something that you would probably be able to sort out. If you were producing it as a print, you could warm the image up. For me, there's a little bit too much foreground. I would have cropped it just below that interesting plant in the middle there, just beyond that little rock formation, and then just below that plant, which sits in the center of it. And I feel that would be far more, had more strength compositionally to the picture in the final. It wouldn't matter, you're making it into more of a letterbox shape, but that, like I said, that would suit the subject. So Shirley Heights, Antigua scores 6.
Oriental Lily and Brian.
Yes, another flower type still life subject here. I must admit, when I first read the title, I thought Brian, and then you notice the snail on the plant itself, which is a good touch actually. It just adds that extra element to the picture, something a little bit quirky, but it's still in keeping. There's still a connection between the snail and the plant itself. Very well lit, yet again. The lighting on the flower head is bringing out the detail and so on. You can see the shape of the bottle or the vase, or whatever you want to call it there, going against a dark background to make the main subject stand out. But dark at the top, but you have got some detail in that background or at the base of the image. And then you've got the inclusion of the little snail, which has been picked out by the light. So it looks as though you've got some extra light coming in from the right-hand side as you're looking at the picture, which is just giving a little bit of rim lighting to the snail to give them a bit of shape and form against that dark background. So Oriental Lily and Brian scores 8 points.
The Bath.
Bath, yes. It's quite an intriguing image, really, this one. You've got this old-fashioned style bath, and it gives the impression that the enamel has chipped off in places, and there's a bit of rust coming through at the bottom there, so it's added some interest. And it's had some kind of blending taken place where you've blended in a texture over the top of the image. And then you've got this ghostly figure or translucent figure of this young lady holding seems to me like holding a picture frame, and she's wearing a ball gown type dress, and she's wearing a mask and so on like that, and gloves, sort of coming out of the bath. And then you've got this interesting overlay texture surrounding it. So it's quite intriguing. I think the technique works reasonably well, but for me, I didn't quite make sense to what you're trying to portray, because you've got this figure dressed in a ball gown and gloves and wearing this mask, sort of Venetian type mask, holding this picture frame, and she's coming out of the bath, and I can't really get the connection in the picture. If she was naked or something like that, then you could understand the connection, why she would be in the bath, and why this ghostly figure would be coming out of this old bath. You could understand it, but dressed like that, it doesn't really sort of work for me in that sense. The storytelling factor hasn't really come across in the final image. So the bath scores 7.
Hellebore.
Yeah, another flower, this time close in. So we've no idea if it's a little still life setup or it's actually being photographed outside or whatever, but very successful. Getting in on the center of the plant, so the rest of the image is filling the frame with this square format. The main focal point is in the center. You've got all the little stamens, some interesting shape being created by the petals, subtle colors again, with these greens and yellows, and then the yellows of the stamens, very similar colors, and there's not too much contrast in the colors, so it works very well as a subtle image. And yes, you can imagine this as a print, and again you could enhance those subtleties to great effect as a finished print. So Hellebore scores 8 points.
Starting to fade.
Yep. I did say there was a lot of still life flower type pictures, and yet we have another one. Very successful, this one. You've got the three flowers composition that works well. They look, as one of them at the bottom there, the lower one is seen better days, is beginning to wilt, but I quite like that. Then you've got this interesting bottle stroke vase, which they're sitting slightly off center, but the flowers themselves are kind of leaning into that space it's left. The textures and the colorations of the background and the base mimic the coloration of the bottle very subtly again, which I think is very good. And you've got light colored petals on the plant against this lighter background. So it's all to do with subtlety in the image. Would make a lovely print. You can imagine that as a print. So we're going to hang on to that one, please. Hold back that one.
Avocet.
Yeah, natural history shot of the avocet wading through the water, obviously looking for food. We've presented it in this sort of narrow letterbox format, which you wouldn't normally do for a natural history subject, but I can see why the photographer's done it, because you've got this area of water which hasn't got a great deal of interest in it, and then you've got the mud flat behind it. Again, isn't a great deal of interest there. So you want to show its environment to show where it's feeding, but you don't want to show too much of it. So you crop it down in this narrow letterbox, which, like I said, sets the subject off well, leaving some space on the left-hand side for it to move into. The bird itself is sharp where it needs to be, on its head and beak and the rest of the body and so on. Dullish lighting, but it's helped to bring the detail out in the light colored plumage of the bird itself. So where I've lost my place, Avocet scores 7 points.
Stone chat with grub.
Yep. Natural history subject, superb quality to this image of the bird. The quality on the bird is beautiful, all the detail in the feathers and so on. You've even got lovely detail in the broken off log or branch or whatever it is which it's sitting on, and the background's been thrown totally out of focus, muted to make the subject stand out from its surroundings. Has a natural feel to the background there, and the added point of this little bird, it's actually got a grub in its beak, so it's actually doing something. It adds that extra element of interest to the final image. Catch light in the eyes, in the eye itself, to add some life to it. Plenty of space for the bird itself to look into, so compositionally it's very successful, and that's another one we're going to hold back.
The final few bends.
Yeah, sport in action, I suppose you could say this one is, with the racing car. A bit of panning going on here. Not easy to do, to sort of follow the vehicle using a fairly slow shutter speed, get the vehicle sharp, at the same time get the movement in the foreground, in the background. But the photographer has successfully done that, so that the motor car itself is sharp. You can see a little bit of movement on the tires, on the wheels, so that's great. Bit of more space in the front than you got behind for it to move into. So that's been handled very successfully. It's a little bit unfortunate that you had those two stray people in the foreground there. Gentleman with I think it's a man, hard to tell, but there's a man with a hat, and I think it's a lady next to him, which are obviously part of the pan, and it's cutting into the front of the vehicle. Not too much of a distraction, but it's a little bit of a shame they're actually there. Nothing you could do about it at the taking stage if they happen to walk into your shot. Yes, if you've got the skills, you could clone them out and rebuild that area of the picture. But nevertheless, that one scores, the final few bends scores 7 points.
Spring dawn.
Yeah, landscape shot here with the one tree or lone tree, I suppose, on the field set against the sky. The sky itself has a lot of interest in the image. There's some interesting detail in the cloud formation there against the darker blue. You're photographing, obviously you're photographing against the light and the early morning light. So you've got the light source in the picture. You can just see the sun breaking through the distant clouds there just below the tree itself. And you've got those yellows and oranges coming through, which is illuminating the field itself, giving this sort of pinky hue to the image. But at the same time, you've got the darker blues at the top. Quite a strong and striking sky, and it could have overpowered the image, but the photographers kept it simple by just having that one semi-silhouetted tree, which again has a definite shape. And like I said, if you're going to throw something into silhouette, or it's got to have a definite shape so we can recognize what it is. And that has, you can see the sort of skeletor. There's no leaves on the tree, so it's got a definite shape in the final image. So that one scores lost my place. Oh, 6 points.
Who said I'm greedy?
Yep, a lot of interest in this picture due to the subject matter itself. The two parrots squawking at each other, and obviously one of them's got a lot of food all over his head and beak. So he's obviously been eating the food, where you can see a bowl on the right hand side there, which obviously has had some fruit or something in there which they've been eating. The birds themselves have been rendered very well. There's good detail in the plumage and so on, and they're sharp where they need to be, you know, all over. It's a shame there's a lot going on in the background, because it becomes a little bit complicated overall. You've got a wall in the background, you've got a strip of a light area at the top of the wall, you've got some bright areas with the grasses, you've got another curved wall at the bottom, and like you say, you've got the bowl on the right hand side. So there's a lot going on in the picture which is slightly distracting away from the main subject, but it still has a lot of interest. So who said I'm greedy scores 6 points.
White Alstroemeria.
I'm glad you pronounced that, because I would have struggled with that one. Yes, another flower stroke still life type subject picture here. Again, extremely good quality. The detail in those flowers, even though they're white flowers, there's plenty of detail in those petals. And I like the way that's been brought out, well lit to bring it out. You've got shape and form and depth to the image, against a black background again, which, like I've mentioned before, helps to simplify it, so you don't have any distractions to take your attention away from the main subject. I like the way that those green leaves come out both sides. They sort of balance up in the picture, where you've got the mass of flowers in the center there. So that one scores 8 points.
Mute swan.
Yep, you could say this is a natural history subject, I suppose, with the swan standing in the lake or the pond or wherever it is, and then you've got this reflection of the swan at the bottom there, which is slightly distorted by the reflection. Just looking at the back of the swan, which isn't ideal, but it's turning its head in profile, so that saved it. You can see the shape of the head, and the beak and so on. So that's lifted the picture. Interesting background, which is slightly darkened down, but at the same time, the light is picking out the swan, so it stands out from its background. It has a natural feel again in the picture. But it's had I'm assuming it could have been the way it was photographed, I'm not sure, but it's got a slight sort of softness to the image. Now, whether that's been added afterwards or it's just, you know, to do with the focusing, I'm not quite sure. So it's given almost an artistic feel to the final image. So it's taking it away from being a natural history shot to a more artistic pictorial picture on this occasion. The lighting's quite strong, which could be problematic when it comes to a bird with white plumage, but you've managed to retain the detail reasonably well in the picture. So muted swan scores 7.
Mosque framed by ornate doorway.
Yep, you've got the mosque itself in colour in the background there through the aperture of the mosque doorway. Quite often you see, you know, if you've got arched buildings and you've got an archway or something like that, and then you've got a building beyond, you use the arch or the entrance to frame the building in the background, and that's what this sort of reminds me of. Different to have the color through the aperture, the picture through the aperture in color, and then the doorway itself in monochrome. And I get the slight impression, and I might be wrong, and I do apologize if I'm wrong, that it's not a natural framing, because to me the actual black and white doorway looks rather cut out, and so it's as if it's been put over the final image. That may just be an illusion, I'm not sure. Doesn't quite work too successfully for me, and I think it's to do with the door at the bottom. You've got this smaller door which sticks up into the center of the picture, and it's cutting into that viewpoint we've got of the mosque in the background. And really what you want to do is you want to see that slight lead in that is naturally there in the color mosque through the aperture. And I find that door sticking up sort of breaks that simplicity a little bit. So it becomes a little bit overpowering to the final image. So mosque framed by ornate doorway scores 6.
Welcome to Watford.
Yep, welcome to Watford. Obviously this is a piece of street art, I suppose. I think they're meant to be seats by the look of it, because you've got a person sitting on one. Obviously very interesting to see this in this environment, and you can see why the photographer was attracted to this scene. Difficult to photograph because you've got a lot going on in the picture, haven't you? You've got buildings in the background, you've got the station sign in there, and you've got other buildings and various other bits and bobs. So it's difficult to compose and simplify, but I think the photographer has done a reasonable job, because the actual artwork itself stands out very well indeed, has interest in the way it's the original artist or sculpture actually created them, but the photographer's meant to create a record of that scene very successfully. The lighting suits the subject, strong lighting, contrasty light, but that helps to bring out the shape and form and bring out the detail very well in the picture. And I think it's fortunate you got that one person sitting on the O, so to speak, of the word there, just to give you a little human interest in the final image. So welcome to Watford scores 7.
Unwrapped.
Yep, another still life subject with a flower main subject. Very simplistic, this one, isn't it? Because you've got the one flower, one daffodil in this sort of egg-shaped oval pot or vase sticking straight up, but it's put to one side, it's over to the right, so you've got space to the left. Some subtleties of color in the background, then in the backdrop, these sort of light blue tones gradually comes down to these yellowy tones of the paper, the wrapping paper, or I don't know what, crepe paper or something like that you tend to use, which are opposite colors. So I quite like that graduations of tone. Obviously the yellow flower head is set against the blue background, so you've got opposite colors there. So it increases the contrast between the two and makes that subject really stand out. Qualities there we're looking for, the subtleties are there we're looking for in the final image. So we're going to hang on to that one, please.
UK glamping break.
Yep, we got the, well, it looks like we got sort of tents in the background. I should imagine it was not for everyday camping, but probably some reenactment type event or something going on in the park or whatever, purely by the type of tents you can see in the background there. And also the gentleman we can see in the picture here, who's dressed in old-fashioned clothing, Tudor times or something like that. And he's got these large staff and everything in his hand. Fills the frame well. The lighting is picking him out, bringing out the detail of his clothing. I had to do a double take of what's poking out of his tunic, but then I realized I think it's his dagger. So the details there, the lighting works well, even on his face, it's bringing it, you know, you can see the skin tones. Perhaps there's a little bit cluttered in the background there because you haven't thrown the background out of focus. The tents and so on are quite sort of sharp in focus in the background there. So they do tend to distract a little bit away from the gentleman himself. And ideally, you can guess what I'm going to say, it would be better if he was looking at us. I'm not sure what he's looking at. He's looking to one side. And because he's the main subject of the photograph, we really ideally want him looking at us. So we got that eye-to-eye contact, and that helps to draw you in onto him in the picture. So UK clamping break scores 6.
Wilting lily.
Wilting lily. Yeah, I know her well. Oh, good old wilting lily. Yes, another still life subject, this one, using the flower, but this time the flower had definitely seen better days. It's sort of draped over the vase itself. Some interesting colours in against this sort of beigey colour background there, which again, I suppose you could argue that suits the fact that the flower's past its best. And it's losing its vibrance and it's losing, you know, its life, and that sort of beigey background sort of is in keeping with that. And then the vase itself, it's actually softening down as you go to the bottom of the picture. I'm not quite sure why that is, why the vase is slightly softening and going slightly out of focus. I feel this one isn't quite as successful as some of the others still life subjects we've seen. It doesn't quite work so well for me on this occasion. So Wilting Lily scores 6 points.
The water sprite.
Yep, water sprite. Intriguing one, this one. We got what looks like a stream or a pond or something in the foreground there. You can see the water lilies floating on the water, and it looks like a fallen tree on the riverbank or on the side of the lake or whatever, with its roots towards us. It's been diffused. It's had an overlay of texture applied to it to give that sort of dreamlike feel or fantasy feel to the final image. Very similar to the previous image we called the one called the bath. I think it had a similar technique of trying to give a dreamy fantasy feel to the image. And you've got this vignetting effect, but lighter rather than a dark vignette. It's a lighter again, which sort of adds to that fantasy dream-like feel to the picture. And the title was The Water Sprite. And then you've got this figure sort of coming out of, or by the bank, coming out of the water with their arms out. And again, similar to the bathtub one, I don't really get the connection. The title of Water Sprite, you would expect the figure to be more scantily dressed. It would be more like fairy-like or impish looking, young sort of female or male sort of, but like I said, wearing a more sort of natural looking clothing, sort of that sprite feel. But this figure looks a bit like a Venetian, when you get these Venetian mask wearing things, I forget what you call them now, taken in Venice. That's what it reminds me of. So it doesn't say water sprite to me. So again, I'm losing the connection, the storytelling factor in a picture. And that's what lets it down on this occasion. You could imagine if the figure was, like I said, more scantily dressed or more in keeping with the fairy type creature rather than this masked figure. So that one scores 6 points.
Wrap up.
Yep, still life subject. This is a little bit different this time. We have got flowers in it, but a little bit different still life. Very good quality. I think that's the first thing that strikes you in this picture. The quality of the lighting is bringing out all the detail within the image. There's no harsh shadows, very soft, subtle lighting. So you haven't really got any heavy shadows or bright highlights, and it's bringing out the texture and the detail. You've got the hat, the scarf, and the gloves. So you've got a connection there. I must admit, it's superb quality, lovely lighting and everything. I don't get the flower vase with the flowers in. Again, I don't get the connection on that one, but that might just be me because it's called Wrapped Up. I might be missing the point somewhere along the line here, but everything else is superb. Like I said, you know, I would have taken the flower vase out, and I can see why they've got it there, because they wanted some height added to the picture, and possibly you could use something that had more of a connection with the hat, scarf, and gloves. I don't know, a brolly or something like that, which could give you the height. But it's still a very, very good quality still life subject. So that one scores 8.
The pier in winter.
Yeah, chroma pier. Quite a traditional viewpoint of the pier, because you actually walk along the top and that's the viewpoint you get. It's been well captured. Soft lighting, not too contrasty, so it's brought out all the detail. You haven't got any harsh highlights or heavy shadows and so on. Looking at the entrance to the pier, and then you're led out into the sea itself. Perhaps it would have been nice, I don't know if the photographer could have achieved, but you could have got down just a little bit lower so the actual end of the pier broke the horizon, because it actually finishes right on the horizon. But that's just a very minor point, just so it raising it. And you've got some detail in that sky. You've got a bit of cloud formation to help you hold you in. So the pier in winter scores 7 points.
Black-headed gulls on growing.
And I do believe this is the last image, isn't it? Yep.
Yes.
Yep. You can see why the photographer is attracted to this. You've got the old groin itself, and that's why, hence the letterbox composition, because the main subject is the groin. You don't need a lot of sky. So you've cropped that out, and you don't need any more foreground, because obviously the foreground is very similar to the midground, so you wouldn't be much point of adding that. So the letterbox composition suits the subject. Lovely detail in the groins themselves, the wooden structure. Also detail and texture in that cracked mud effect you've got in the foreground. And then you've got the added elements of the two black-headed gulls sitting on the structure. You've got one in the middle and one on the right-hand side there. You have got one on the ground, standing in the foreground. And because it's on the ground, I find it a distraction. I'd rather it wasn't there at all. And ideally, in an ideal world, it would be on that first post, sitting on, so you had a bird on each post. Ideally, that would be the sort of cracking shot. But luck wasn't with you, so one of them jumped down on the ground, which is a little bit of shame, but good quality image. So 7 points for that one.
So we've got 6 held back images.
Yep.
We'll
Okay.
go through them one at a time.
Yep. I'll give you the scores as we go through. Yeah, the buzzard with prey in the snow. That one scores 10 points. So well done, whoever that was.
Faded daffodils.
Faded daffodils. Where are we? Got to find that one. Yeah, faded daffodils scores 9 points.
Meerkat.
Meerkat. Where are you? Meerkat scores 9 points.
Starting to fade.
What number is that one?
Oh, hang on, I'll look at the score sheet.
I've lost it.
That is starting to fade.
We got the same problem as me.
I'm looking at the scores on the mobile.
29.
What
Thank
one?
you, Jen.
Rusty.
Thank you,
20.
Jen.
Sorry, I missed it.
9.
Say that.
29.
29. Oh, yeah. 20. I couldn't see it for looking. 9 points for that one.
Not to score that one. Yeah. Stone chat with grub.
Yeah, stone chat with grub gets 10 points.
And unwrapped.
And also with 10 points is this one unwrapped.
Let's go back to those.
And you want an image of the night, don't you?
Yes, please.
Very close, well, obviously, because they all got 10 points. But the one that gets the image of the night is the stone chat with grub.
And I will give you the authors. And well done to Tori Andrews, who gets image of the night, plus another 10 with buzzard on prey. And well done to Rosie Carpenter for unwrapped.
Well done, both of you. Well done, Tori.
Well done, Tori.
All 3 excellent pictures.
Well done, Tori.
Thank you.
Yes, very well done.
I will just go back and give you the authors of, let's go for 9 or better. Those are the ones that were held back. Yep. So well done. 2 of those are Jan's. Well done, Jan. Faded daffodils and starting to fade. And well done, Lorraine, for meerkat.
Well done, ladies.
Yeah, all very great pictures too. Well done.
Yeah, there was a lot of strong images.
Yeah.
Cool.
It couldn't have been an easy job. They were really good pictures. So well done to everybody. Just before I hand over to Steve to do the thank you, Jan, have you ever looked at the work of a lady called Pat Fruin, who's a member of Chelmsford?
No.
Your white flowers are very much in her style. You'd love her. Take a look.
Sorry,
She's-
Pat Fruin.
Fruin, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, Chelmsford.
Yeah, she belongs to Chelmsford.
Yeah, she does a lot of that sort of technique, doesn't she? She also does it with landscapes as well. I think.
It's all very sort of soft and pasty, yeah.
Pat Frone, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I will have a look.
Right, Steve, where are you?
I'm here.
You're here. I'll hand over to you.
Well, I would just like to thank you very much indeed, Rusty. Actually, I'm going to put my hat on now to
Why are you wearing your hat?
pay you proper homage. thank you for looking so carefully at the images in advance.
That's okay.
Is that a bit better? Yeah.
Yep.
I just wondered what's happened to Houston. Have we all become florists?
Yes, I must admit there was a rather lot of flowers.
I think
I've
it's
gotta
a
tell you,
year of
Rusty,
lockdown, not
I've
being
gotta
able to
tell you
go elsewhere.
It's lockdown. You can't. We haven't got anything else to photograph. We've
That's
not been
true.
anywhere in except in the garden.
Yeah.
There have
They
been
were really
more,
good though.
there were more pictures of flowers tonight than there have been cumulatively in the entire season.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true.
I've no idea why. However,
We've told you why.
However, what I have picked up tonight is that you do like simplicity in the photographs, and that maybe wasn't the best, the greatest theme that we produced. In fact, I'm going to say, I know it's a bit of end of term, maybe not the greatest set of images that this club has ever produced for a competition, but nevertheless, I think we learned an awful lot tonight, and I'd like to thank you very much for that. I have to say, I'd also like to thank Barbie, because lots of judges, when something goes wrong with the appointments, with the arrangements, just back out. And Barbie, God bless her, found an absolutely wonderful replacement. So thank her for that, and thank you for being that very replacement.
Well, I'll put the wig on now.
Hang on a minute. Maybe it wasn't a replacement.
The pink haired wig back on, so it's not too.
Excellent. I did say you'd have to wear a pink wig, didn't I, if you're going to be the substitute, and you've done brilliantly. Now, we all love Barbie. She's delightfully unorthodox and a little bit eccentric. And paradoxically, I've noticed about Barbie, because I've been booking her for years, and I've even had the privilege of photographing her, taking her portraits when I was at Sudbury, which was donkeys years ago. And I've noticed something about Barbie's judging, which is, despite the fact that her images that she publishes are so unusual and so different and so unorthodox, when she judges, she marks down all the really unorthodox pictures and marks up all the conventional pictures. And there was a little bit about that tonight with you, that you take the most fantastic, like dancing skeletons and all sorts of wonderful stuff. And yet when you judge conventionally. So I'm going to ask you a question, and you've only got 30 seconds to answer, right?
Okay.
What is it like to be married to the wonderful paradox, which is Barbie?
It is wonderful.
Too short.
Good answer, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like the answer.
I wouldn't want to be married to anyone else.
Well, of course not. And Michelle Pfeiffer said the very same thing. But honestly, it was great, Rusty. You found the right winners. You picked out the right guys. I don't think you let anything slip through, although I did think that picture of Harwich with the beautiful setting sun in the sky was wonderful. But you said it didn't have the quality. That was a lovely picture. But you picked out the right winners. You did really, really well. Thank you for standing in. And it's been brilliant. We've thoroughly enjoyed your evening. So I'd like everybody in the club to put their hands together and give a big clap to Rusty Lindsay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it. I shall remove my wig now, because people are talking, I think.